Magus, oh Lord. Magus, you are our fiend Lord and Savior, 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 Oh, hi there, and welcome back to part 5 of Chrono Trigger. Today, we will be delving into the depths of the Magnolia Cathedral. Now, this is where the game officially takes off. This is like your first actual legit dungeon, where there's a boss at the end and everything. Everything up until this point has kind of been child's play. So now we're actually getting into the real meat of the game, where we actually have dungeons with lots of enemies, lots of items, lots of stuff to fight. And right off the bat, you are greeted by a new enemy called the Diablo. Now, Diablos, they don't have really any weaknesses to magic, and they actually have much bulkier magic defense than stuff like Nagas. So I just recommend using physical attacks to knock them down. That's probably the best way to go. And I mentioned this last part, but this is just a reminder to you. You can use healing magic outside of battle. So don't be wasting potions recklessly if you don't have to. Potions are cheap, so I mean, if you need to use them, by all means, go ahead. Now, the way this plays, the first room we're in is split up into a left, a right, and a down the center, as you can see on the map. So we're going to take the left path first, mainly because this doesn't have much of anything interesting except for a few items. The first of them is a steel saber. This is a pretty good offensive weapon for Chrono, and it's most likely better than anything you have at this current point in time. Definitely use this. Also, if you loop around the spikes, I know it doesn't look like you can walk around it, and because of that, I actually didn't discover you could go back here for several playthroughs through this game. But you can walk around it and then click that switch and the spikes will drop down. And then in this room you'll actually find some, I guess, prisoners that were trapped here. You're humans! They've hidden the queen in the back. Well, that's good to know. And then also, if you click on the glowy bucket, you can pick up a strength capsule. Feel free to use them if you want. I probably will just sit on them and not use them at all. And then in this first room, there is a bunch of chests we can take a look at, and they contain a ether, a potion, and a Maiden Suit. A Maiden Suit is a very good armor, basically, for females. So they're good for Marla, they're good for Luca, and they're good for one other playable character that we'll get later in the game. So definitely attach that to Luca, definitely worth having. Now there is one last thing that you can find hidden in this room, and there are very few super hidden things in Chrono Trigger, and this is one of them. Most things are fairly in the open and it's hard to miss, but this is one of the most missable things in the entire game, and it happens in the very first major dungeon. It's a Naga bromide, and the weird thing about this is it doesn't even appear in any inventories, so it's not a registered item, it's just there. And later on you'll be able to trade it with somebody, but that's way off later in the game. Until then, you just kind of have it. It's a very odd item. Anyways, you're going to get ambushed by some Underlings for taking the bromide. Underlings are very interesting enemies to fight. They're very bulky and they have a lot of defense. They're just big brutes. So if you can, Cyclone's good here. Again, don't be hesitant to use techs if you have the magic points to use them. There are plenty of save points throughout this place to heal up and use shelters, so don't be hesitant to use your magic at all. Anyways, the Naga bromide, like I said, that'll come into play way down the road. For now, we can just pretend we never even had it. It's a strange little item. Anyways, up the right set of steps, you can fight off with some Vipers. This is probably your first time fighting Vipers. And Vipers are very bulky enemies. They have quite a bit of hit points. But like Nagas, they're very weak to magic, so feel free to use Fire Whirl, and you'll finish them off very, very quickly. If you do use physical attacks on them, just note that they have a lot of hit points. However, they do have a little bit weaker defenses than the Naga, so it's up to you how you decide to take them down. What's with the disguises? Hurry up and change. No need to be walking around like humans. Well, So that's what this is about. They're disguising themselves as humans. Yakra! I heard about that guy. Or monster or whatever. It's all coming together now. Ew. Those poor soldiers. I like how they don't even bother trying to escape even though you free them. The Fiend Lord's statue. Let's follow him and see where he leads us. He's actually going to lead us up to this door, which I mean, we were going to go here. Whoa! Whoa! Are you the queen? Well then. I'm pretty sure the king wouldn't be here. Well, this is very, very strange. Oh, yep. Why am I not surprised? Well, they're going to turn into a bunch of vipers if you attempt to leave the room, and we can fight. Vipers are very, very annoying. In terms of damage, most of the enemies here actually aren't too bad when it comes to actually damaging you. Basically, you just don't want to get into super prolonged fights because that damage adds up. The early enemies in this game, by means, don't do that much damage because I'm assuming the programmers designed it so, you know, you can get through it without too much difficulty. These early dungeons aren't too bad, and yeah. Anyways, next room. Oh boy, a song for the Fiend Lord. And now we have a name for the Fiend Lord, Magus. Now, this character, the Fiend Lord, is going to be a very important part in this game. So, it's a name you'll hear a lot, and it's a character that will play a major role in the game's stories. Now, I've heard multiple pronunciations of his name, and I believe the proper pronunciation is Magus, but I have always pronounced it Magus, and I just can't change my bad habits, so I will forever refer to him throughout the walkthrough as Magus, even though I'm 99% sure it's Magus. So just keep him in mind. He is definitely going to be a major part of your storyline. Anyways, for interrupting their little song, you are going to get engaged in combat. 3 Diablos and 2 Nagas. Now, in Chrono Trigger, you can fight up to 6 enemies at a time, so just keep that in mind. Oops, I didn't want to attack the Naga. And these are all enemies we've fought thus far, so you know the drill with them. They're all weak to magic. Use your magic. Whoops, I meant to use Flamethrower. I am so good at this game, guys. I am so good. Ow. So yeah. In the game of Chrono Trigger, you can fight up to 6 enemies at a time. Typically speaking, it's rare you'll actually fight 6 full enemies in one battle at one time, but it is worth mentioning that that is the cap on enemies you can fight. Up here you can grab a speed belt and a guardian bangle. Now, speed belt is basically an upgraded version of Chrono's headband that increases your speed by 2. So if you value speed and you didn't really switch over to the power glove, feel free to upgrade to the speed belt. The guardian bangle will increase your defense and stamina. Now, your stamina stat, it might not be the most obvious, but stamina actually influences your character's base defenses. I know that you wouldn't really think that for a stamina stat, but it is related to your defenses. So if you're looking to make your character more bulky, use that. Anyways, that wraps up this right wing. Next up on the roster is heading down the center, and there are more of the same familiar enemies that we've been fighting here. Nothing too bad. More Diablos. I mean, battling here is pretty straightforward. The nice thing about Chrono Trigger is typically a dungeon or a new area in a game won't bombard you with a million new enemies. Most areas will have 4 or 5 new enemies so that you can get accustomed to how the enemies work and you can fight them. If you come up here, you'll be ambushed by some more Vipers and more Diablos. Like I said, this is where the game, I think, officially kind of kicks off. The first 2 areas, Truce Canyon and Guardia Forest, are to get familiar with the game. And this is where you actually have to start worrying about fighting. Oh, I also picked up Slurp Slash on Frog. I forgot to mention that. I'll use it here to demonstrate it for you. Frog's new tech that you can pick up after a little bit of time is Slurp Slash. You basically use your tongue to grab an enemy, pull them in, and slash them down. It's a pretty solid early game tech for offensive damage, and it makes sense that the game designers gave him Slurp Slash because his first tech, all it does is heal. Now, also, when you acquire Slurp Slash with Cyclone, you'll get Frog and Chrono's first dual tech, X Strike. And basically, the 2 of them, they'll just cross paths and strike an enemy. It's a super strong sword technique, and it does a lot of good damage early on, so definitely worth mentioning that you have that. Now, if you're like me, you're probably going to spam Chrono's magic quite a bit. Normally when I play through Chrono Trigger on my own time, I don't really spam techs. In fact, I always make it my personal goal to get through this entire area, including the boss battle, without ever healing once with like any items, because I'm weird and I don't like using items. But since this is the walkthrough, I'm like, I don't want to spend an hour fighting battles with auto attacks, so I'm going to just be using my shelters and stuff to heal up. If you are a little bit more conservative with your techs, maybe you just want to use an ether instead of a full shelter. But shelters are pretty cheap, and this is a save point that you can take advantage of. You can save here if you want, and in fact, if this is your first time playing through the game, I definitely would advise of it. Now, if you come up here, you can't actually go further at all, and if you head left and right, you're going to see 2 sets of staircases. This cathedral is pretty symmetrical, which kind of makes sense because cathedrals typically are symmetrical. Anyways, you can go down either set of steps, but whatever set of steps you choose to go down, you're going to trigger a trap, and the steps are going to force you to slide down them. And then you can get your first hand in combat with a Mad Bat. Now, Mad Bats are very, and I do mean very, frustrating enemies to fight. Why? Well, they're not very strong. The thing that makes them annoying is they have a ton of evasion. They're very good at dodging attacks, and I would advise, I don't know how true this is, but Luca's gun, I find, is just awful in terms of accuracy on Mad Bats. I think the odds of hitting with a sword are a little bit better, so I typically like using swords on the Mad Bats, and then if there's other enemies, I'll use Luca to attack them with like flamethrower or something. Mad Bats are just incredibly frustrating enemies to fight against. And it's also worth mentioning that Mad Bats have a very weird hitbox item. It may not look like it, but their hitbox is actually below the Mad Bat. So it may look like you're hitting it, but you're really not. Well, the reason I say this is because it affects techs like Cyclone, where it hits in a radius around the enemy, And the hitbox for the Mad Bat is below the enemy, so if you target the Mad Bat, it may affect the radius of techs like Cyclone and Flamethrower. I know it sounds weird, and it's one of those things where you kind of just have to play the game to get a feel for it. There aren't too many enemies like that in Chrono Trigger. Typically you see an enemy and that's where your techs are going to hit, but Mad Bats are just really strange enemies. They are incredibly frustrating, and I personally just despise them with every ounce of my being. They're not bad by any means, like they're one-shottable. It's just that they dodge everything, and it's so frustrating. Luca's Flamethrower but I didn't mention this earlier, but these blue Underlings are a new enemy that you haven't fought, and like Nagas, they also are very weak to magic. Now, you'll find, and this just goes along with the lore of the Fiend race, I guess you could say. You'll find that Fiends in general tend to be very weak to magic. And the reason for this is because humans can't really use magic. There's no such thing as magic using humans in this era. And because of that, Fiends they're pretty strong against physical type attacks, but they never really had to develop a need for magical defense. So you'll find that, as just a general rule of thumb, Fiend type enemies tend to be a little bit weaker to magic and a little bit stronger against enemies that, What am I saying? I lost my train of thought. I got distracted. Sorry. I'm losing my mind. I'm a little bit under the weather today. I apologize if I sound a little off. I don't normally get like allergies in the fall time. I have horrible allergies in the spring. But I seem to be just, I guess it feels like allergies. Anyways, I'm rambling. Chrono, eventually you'll probably pick up his Wind Slash tech also going through this place. Wind Slash is actually elemental. It has lightning type affinity to it. So Wind Slash is considered magic, and it attacks all enemies in a straight line. It's a very, very good early game tech, and again, it's magic, so it's important and worth mentioning. Now, on the other side of this place, you noticed a switch, and that switch actually drops the spikes in that center room. This switch, yeah, it's a trap, and it puts 2 extra Mad Bats for you to fight. Oh, joy, right? Don't you just love fighting these things? Magic tends to be more accurate against Mad Bats, so I hate wasting good magic points on enemies, but it is more accurate, and you can use magic if you want. You should have, for sure, going into this place, 2 shelters. And you should have just picked up 2 shelters if you've done everything thus far without even having to buy any. So I recommend having at least 2 shelters, and if you have at least 2 shelters, you can get through this place and spam magic to your heart's content, and you should never really run out of magic. Anyways, one last little room. This area is kind of divided into like 9-ish segments, I guess. Stop that, you idiot! I said it a million times. That one's just a decoy. He's referring to the switch in the previous room. And then he's gonna be like, sneaking past me, huh? You must really think you're smart. Yeah, if I wanted to, I would have just kept walking without talking to you. But instead, I decided that I wanted to beat you to a pulp. Yay! Luca's Flamethrower is a one-shot against these types of enemies. It's not hard at all. I don't know if it's just me, because I've played this game a million times, but Chrono Trigger to me is not that difficult of a game. I feel like when I first played it and I didn't understand how to do anything, I struggled a lot, because you had to experiment with enemies, you didn't really know for sure what they did. But now that I'm like super experienced with the game, I know what everything does in the game, so it's really easy to me. I guess it just comes with playing the game so much. Anyways, in this room, 5 enemies for you to fight, 2 blue underlings, and a couple Diablos to add to the list. Not too bad. Use Chrono and Luca's Fire Whirl on the 3 blue underlings. That should help you out considerably with fighting them, and then it's not that bad. Not that bad at all. Magic, again, fiends tend to be weak to it. It's a shame because in the early stages of the game, you actually don't get too much magic to use. Okay, picked up another tech. This is Luca's Hypno Wave, and what it does is it puts your enemies to sleep. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't think I've ever really used that tech in the game. When I first played through the game the first couple of times, I tried using it and it would always miss and it would never work on enemies, and I just got bored of using it. I'm like, this thing never works because the tech can fail. So I've never used the tech much at all. I find it to be a waste of a tech, to be honest, and feel free to try using it. Like I said, it puts enemies to sleep if it's successful, which can be helpful. But I just prefer raw power. I would rather use flamethrower with my turn than put enemies to sleep. So that's that. Play the organ again. I mean, you would think they would make the next trap a little bit different, but nope, just another organ. And also you can pick up the iron sword for Frog. It's a little bit stronger than the bronze sword he was using, but you'll find that it won't really make too much of a difference. And then we could slip and slide down the steps, and we could head up here. And I love this sign. The sign changes what it says after playing the organ. Well, if you're that determined to get through, by all means. I just find it funny because the sign switches what it said. If you wait a moment, the blue underlings will go up a little bit and you can fight all 4 of these enemies at the same time. Makes things a little bit more convenient. Again, Magus and underlings, all weak to magic. If you want to use magic, by all means, go ahead. Physical attacks will take a little bit longer. They won't be one-shots, but it does work. It's also worth mentioning, because up until this point, we haven't really used a party of 3. 3 is the max active party you can have at a time. You can have up to 7 playable characters with you at a time, but only 3 of them can be active at one time and fight at the same time. And you can have people on standby not attacking. One thing that is highly recommended in a lot of guides to beginners, and I'll say this too, is if you find yourself struggling with enemies, particularly boss battles, just have a designated healer. Have one person on standby who uses... their only job is to heal. They'll use potions, they'll use Athenian waters, they'll do whatever to heal up the team. Generally speaking, if you follow my guide and follow all my advice, you should never really have a need to have a designated healer, but it is worth mentioning. Sometimes there's boss battles where you do just need to have someone ready to heal. Anyways, there's a save point. Now, save points in a lot of games are good indicators of when a boss battle is about to come up. And this is very, very true. We have reached the end of the Magnolia Cathedral, and I'm going to wrap up the part. If you need to, I highly recommend you use a shelter, heal up your party, and get prepared to fight. That wraps up this video. Next time, we shall save the Queen. Thank you, and good night.